Something to Shock the World. August 8th, 1969. The front page of that morning's Los Angeles Times described an ordinary day in the city. Central Receiving Hospital had failed to save the life of a wounded policeman. The legislature had passed a new budget for schools, and scientists were optimistic that Mars's south polar cap could be hospitable to alien life. In London, the Beatles had been photographed crossing the street outside their studio, a shot that would become the cover of Abbey Road. Walter Cronkite led the CBS Evening News with a story about the devaluation of the franc. The space race was in full swing, and the Americans were dreaming, sometimes with a touch of trepidation, about the science-fictional future. Less than 3 weeks earlier, NASA had put the first man on the moon, an awe-inspiring testament to our technological ingenuity. Conversely, the number one song in the country was Zager and Evans in the year 2025, which imagined a dystopian future where you ain't gonna need to tell the truth, tell no lies. Everything you think, do, and say is in the pill you took today. It would prove to be a more trenchant observation about the present moment than anyone would have thought. Late that night at the Spahn Movie Ranch, a man and 3 women got in a beat-up yellow 1959 Ford and headed towards Beverly Hills. A ranch hand heard one of the women say, "We're gonna get some fucking pigs." The woman was Susan Sadie Atkins, 21, who'd grown up mostly in San Jose. The daughter of 2 alcoholics, she'd been in her church choir and at the glee club and said that her brother and his friends would often molest her. She had dropped out of high school and moved to San Francisco, where she worked as a topless dancer and gotten into LSD. "My family keeps telling me, you're going downhill, you're going downhill, you're going downhill," she would later say. "So I just went downhill. I went all the way down to the bottom." Huddled beside her in the back of the car, they'd torn out the seats to accommodate more food from the dumpster dives they often went on, was Patricia Katie Krenwinkel, 21, from Inglewood. Krenwinkel had developed a hormone problem as a kid, leading her to overeat and fear that she was ugly and unwanted. As a teen, she got into drugs and started to drink heavily. One day in 1967, she'd left her car in a parking lot, failed to collect her 2 paychecks from her job at an insurance company, and disappeared. In the passenger seat was Linda Casbian, 20, from New Hampshire. She'd played basketball in high school, but she dropped out to get married. The union lasted less than 6 months. Not long after, in Boston, she was arrested in a narcotics bust. By the spring of 1968, she'd remarried, had a kid, and moved to Los Angeles. She sometimes introduced herself as Yana the Witch. And at the wheel was Charles Tex Watson, 23 and 6'3", from Texas. Watson had been a Boy Scout and the captain of his high school football team. He sometimes helped his dad, who ran a gas station and grocery store. At North Texas State University, he'd joined a fraternity and started getting stoned. Soon he dropped out, moved to California, and got a job as a wig salesman. One day he picked up a hitchhiker who turned out to be Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, a chance occurrence that changed both of their lives forever. That night in the Ford, all 4 were dressed in black from head to toe. None of them had a history of violence. They were part of a hippie commune that called itself the family. Living in isolation at the Spahn Ranch, whose mountainous 500 acres and film sets had once provided dramatic backdrops for the Western-themed movies and TV shows. The family had assembled a new-aged bricolage of environmentalism, anti-establishment politics, free love, and apocalyptic Christianity, rounded out with a vehement rejection of conventional morality. More than anything, they lived according to the whims of their leader, the 34-year-old Charles Mills Manson, who had commanded them to take their trip that night. The four arrived at 10050 Cielo Drive, where the actress Sharon Tate lived with her husband, the filmmaker Roman Polanski. He was away in London at the time, scouting locations for The Day of the Dolphin, a movie in which a dolphin is trained to assassinate the President of the United States. The drive to Cielo would have taken about 40 minutes. It was just after midnight when they arrived. Benedict Canyon was quiet, seemingly worlds away from the hustle and sprawl of Los Angeles. The house, built in 1942, had belonged to a French actress who'd modeled it on the Norman country estates of her youth. A long, low rambler at the end of a cul-de-sac, invisible from the street, it sat on 3 acres of bucolic, isolated land, nestled against a hillside on a bluff. It afforded views of Los Angeles glittering to the east and Bel Air's fulsome estates unfurling to the west. On a clear day, you could see straight to the Pacific 10 miles out. Watson scaled a pole to sever the phone lines to the house. He'd been there before, and he knew where to find them right away. There was an electric gate leading to the driveway, but instead of activating it, the four elected to jump over an embankment and drop onto the main property. All of them were carrying buck knives. Watson also had a .22 buntline revolver. Casbian remained on the outskirts, keeping watch.